From WXCI 91.7 in Danbury, this is Public Reading Club, a radio program dedicated to discussions about books, writing, reading with writers and book people. Your host is Matt Caputo.
Thanks for joining us again. It's been really fun putting these episodes together, and this week's guest is absolutely one of my all-time favorite writers. Lawrence Block has been writing crime, mystery, and suspense fiction for more than half a century. He's probably published 100 books or more, and endless amount of short stories, starting in the 1950s. And he came on today to discuss his newest book called The Autobiography of Matthew Scudder. And it's a special addition to the Matthew Scudder crime novel series that he wrote, about 19 books of, starting in 1976. One of them, A Walk Among the Tombstones, became a pretty popular kind of Netflix on-demand streaming movie with Liam Neeson, which I really enjoyed, and he enjoyed it. But he's got tons of great books in the Matthew Scudder series. My favorite one is a book called Out on the Cutting Edge, and it involves a missing female and the kind of maze around New York City required to find such a person that's kind of disappeared and possibly using a fake name. And it's that type of, hard scrabble tale that Lawrence Block has just been so effective and really so prolific at writing over the years. I love every single Matthew Scudder novel. One of the most popular ones is called 8 Million Ways to Die. And that became a movie that didn't quite, for many reasons, really didn't resemble what the Matthew Scudder series was all about. It was kind of miscast, and the location was incorrect. It was set in Los Angeles, and Scudder is very much a New York, being, and somebody that exists mostly in Manhattan and kind of traveling about the outer boroughs. There's very little doubt in my mind that this is one of the greatest living writers today, and just to have him come on here to speak to us not only about his new book, The Autobiography of Matthew Scudder, which is available for pre-order now and will be out in June. He did get a chance to talk about a little bit about some of my favorite of his books, and one book that has a local connection to Danbury, Connecticut, where we do the show from WXCI 91.7 on FM and streaming on WXCI.org. But I've just been a fan of his work for so long that I think one of the reasons we're here today is because I wanted to talk to writers like him, learn about their experiences. He had a lot of ups and downs, and I still don't believe that enough of his work has been attempted to be made as a film. I think they're good enough, and they're better stories than maybe we see in the movie format quite often. So, without much further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Lawrence Block, but I also want you to be aware that you can follow Public Reading Club on Instagram at Public Reading Club. You can also follow us on Facebook. You can find us on there. And you can also email us book recommendations at thepublicreadingclub@gmail.com. And this is so important because we really do want to hear from you, the readers, and we want to know what you read. And especially if you read a book by somebody that was interviewed on the show, we'd really love to hear what your impressions of the book were, and if you'd be interested in reading more of that author or whatnot. This is all about reading. This will probably be one of our shorter shows. We are trying to mix up the guests a little bit, but I wanted to take this special opportunity to speak to Lawrence Block, who's been just an absolute hero of mine. At 84 years old, he'll be releasing the 20th Matthew Scudder book on June 24th, his 85th birthday. So it's just amazing to be on a chat with Lawrence Block, knowing how much time he's put into writing. He's given some great interviews. If you go on YouTube, if you look up his great book, A Writer Prepares, it's kind of a writing memoir that has a lot of great insight. He started back in the days when, writers made their living with kind of pulpy and even kind of, soft adult literature, if you will, for mass market paperback industry. And it's just great to connect with a writer like that. I think today, especially through the years, there was a lot of money at one point in magazine writing and, other things like that. Novelists that kind of also wrote profiles for magazines, or they also did some type of journalism in the New York Times, let's say. Lawrence Block has, and we talk about it briefly, he has been a fiction writer from the 1950s, writing under pseudonyms. And if you're interested in reading more of his work, a great place to start is the Matthew Scudder series. And you can go on from there to some of the great stuff by him that has been published by Hard Case Crime. And ultimately, we're just excited to have a guest like this come on, and we hope you enjoy the interview. So, again, guys know where to follow us. You know how to reach out to us. We'd love to hear about the books you're reading. So send us a line at any time. Be well, and I'll see you at the bottom of the show. How are you today, Mr. Block?
Okay.
It's good to see you. I think this radio show, which we've done for just a few episodes now, I think it was just an excuse to interview you, to be 100% honest. I really love all your work, and I am from that old New York that you write about. That's where I grew up. I'm from Elmhurst, Queens, originally, and I can see, sometimes when you wrote about little motels on Queens Boulevard, like I know exactly where they are, even though you don't know where they are, really. You know what I mean? And there's just so much of your work that's so poignant, and I'm just so grateful to be here speaking with you today, sir.
Well, thanks very much, and let's just relax and have fun.
It's great to have you on the show here, Public Reading Club from WXCI 91.7. We're among one of the greatest crime fiction writers of all time on our show today, and it's just a pleasure to have Mr. Lawrence Block here with us. What are you up to these days outside of writing? Are you doing any walking still?
Nothing much. I'm taking it pretty easy. I get to the gym about 3 times a week, and that keeps me going.
That's good to hear. Before we get into the new book, I kind of wanted to. I was always curious about your early years as a writer, which some of which is chronicled in the great memoir A Writer Prepares. But what was your earliest experiences with being drawn towards writing?
Well, I had no thought of writing as something I would want to do or that anybody did really until my third year in high school when I began. I was really enjoying writing the compositions required for English class and got a lot of encouragement from the teacher. And I began to write things with a certain amount of imagination to them. And in one, I talked about various career thoughts I'd had over the years of what I might want to be, and ruled out one after the other. And at the end, I said one thing, reading over this composition, one thing that's abundantly clear to me. I may not have phrased it quite that way. Is that I can never be a writer. And the teacher wrote in the margin, "I'm not so sure about that." And that was the first time the idea of being a writer had ever occurred to me. And that was it. From immediately, I thought, yes, that's what I'll do, and so on, and everything followed, and didn't take very long, as you know.
Did you seek kind of formal writing training in the college years?
Well, I took a class, but I was already really busy writing, and the class I took the workshop at Antioch College with Nolan Miller. He was the professor there, very nice old fellow, and that was gave me a specific time every to do something, and I just made sure I handed in something every week, which nobody else did. And but that was in my second year there, and my third year I wasn't there. I over the summer got a job at a literary agency in New York, and saw right away that I was going to learn more there than probably than any other situation in the world, actually, but certainly more than going back to school. And it was not an opportunity I was willing to give up. So I dropped out of college and stayed there. And while I was there, I was writing and selling a fair amount of what I wrote. And that was it. I did go back to school for a year after a year at the agency, and it was really how you're going to keep down on the farm. I was busy writing. That really was what I prioritized, that and dissipation. So I didn't pay much attention to my studies. And at the end of a third year there, the school said, let me know that they thought I'd be happier elsewhere. And I thought, my God, how perspicacious of them! I would be much happier elsewhere. And I've been a freelance writer ever since.
That's amazing. I kind of wanted to ask you a couple questions about that I always wondered over the years. Did you do, obviously you wrote in a time where there was a huge market for short fiction and different length kind of novels and whatnot. But did you ever do any sports writing or newspaper writing, anything like that?
No, not really. No, the year that I returned to college for my third year, I did edit the college newspaper there for a period of 3 months was the terms that one had, and I did that for 3 months, and that was interesting and all that. But throughout this time, I was writing for fiction for publication, and that's what I've done ever since.
I don't know if anybody's asked you about this before or if you can even recall it because I'm sure it gets difficult, but do you remember your very first published story? Do you remember that, whatever it was? You don't have to say what the actual angle was, but do you remember the feeling?
Oh, sure. I remember the story. In fact, the story is still available. It's in my a couple of my collections, especially it's easiest to find in my uh, omnibus collection called Enough Row. And it's a story called You Can't Lose, and it sold to Manhunt magazine, and I think appeared in early '58. I'm not sure.
Wow, 1958. When you started writing back in the 50s, can you tell our audience, we have a lot of MFA students who listen and people that are writing in all types of genres, but could you speak to them a little bit about what the market for creative fiction was like back then in the 50s?
Well, it wasn't a piece of cake. It wasn't that easy. I don't think I don't think professionalism in the arts is an artistic career of any sort is ever easy. The threshold is always high. There are always far more people who want to do it than are going to be able to. And it was that way then, and it's that way now. Now there's more hoops to jump through now, I gather. I don't know very much about what it's like to start out now because I started out 65 years ago, whatever. But it's always difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult. What it was like then, I don't know. I wrote stories and sent them to magazines and told that they got tired of sending them back. and there were markets that were receptive. In one sense, it's much easier now because anybody can be published because of the miracle of self-publishing, which is what I've done in recent years with virtually all of my books. I'll frequently have a deluxe edition published with Subterranean Press or another small press publisher. But for the paperback and the ebook, I'm more comfortable just publishing myself. And I'm not saying that this is the road to riches by any means, but it's a possibility. Now I have the advantage of having a certain number of people who are interested in what I write, or at least recognize my byline. Whereas for someone who starts out, it's not they don't have that edge going for them. But there are people now who are writing and publishing themselves and making a better living at it than I am, and they're doing just fine. So it's an interesting time. I suspect all times are interesting, but this one certainly is.
You've definitely been through a lot of times as a writer and with different experiences. Lawrence Block with us on Public Reading Club 91.7 Danbury, Connecticut. Mr. Block, I wanted to ask you, when did you feel like you committed to the crime genre that you're really so well known for? Because I feel like maybe you played with a few different things before that. I feel like the character of Evan Tanner is completely different from Scudder, and I believe Tanner appeared before him, right?
Yes, but that was all in the overall crime fiction genre, spy, crime, whatever. But
Tanner's more of a spy.
Yeah, Tanner's sort of a unacknowledged freelance spy, but an interesting character for me to write. But I don't know when I committed to anything. I've written books throughout that have not been in the field of crime fiction. What happened, I didn't set out initially with a goal of being a crime writer. I just wanted to be able to write things that people would read and want to publish. And I suppose, given the right encouragement at the right time, I could have wound up writing seed catalog copy instead. But this is the way it went. Actually, in the early years, I just found out empirically that the work of mine that seemed to be the best and the most satisfying was in the overall field of crime fiction, which is a very broad canopy. Crime fiction. All it really requires, I know Otto Penzler's definition of a mystery is any book in which a crime or the threat of a crime is central to the plot. That's all.
Otto Penzler, owner of a mysterious bookshop in New York City, prolific editor, and also nearby resident to Danbury, I believe. I believe he lives outside town here a little bit. We're going to go into the autobiography of Matthew Scudder, which is great. It's a really fun addition to the Scudder library, if you will. If you're a Matthew Scudder fan, this is a must read. I really must say I enjoyed it, but I want to ask you about two books that come to mind right at this second. The first book I discovered during the pandemic, and I've got to tell you that it meant so much to me at the time because the only thing I could do was get up very early and walk. And the book is Random Walk. And if you could just, sir, just give us tell us for a minute what inspired you to write Random Walk, and if you could kind of just summarize it a little bit for the audience listening.
Well, Random Walk is
this is one of my favorite Lawrence Block books.
Thank you. It's an atypical book for me, or probably for anyone. And I know when I was doing a lot of tours with books, I knew right away if someone came up and said, I like your work generally, but there's one book of yours that just changed my life, and I read it 15 times, and I bought a T-shirt that was, that kind of reaction. He was very likely going to be talking about Random Walk. And at the same time, if someone came up and said, I've been a big fan of yours, but there was one book you wrote, and I couldn't make head or tails out of it, and I don't know what the hell you had in mind, but it certainly didn't work for me. And that, once again, he'd be talking about Random Walk. It was a curious book, and the circumstances of its creation were curious. I was not sure what I was going to write. I had booked, for the first time ever for me, I'd booked myself into a writer's colony in Virginia for a month.
Wow.
And I didn't know what I was going to write when I got there. And the date was fast approaching, and I just figured I would see what happened. And then I won't call it a vision, but I got an impression, a thought of someone starting to walk across the country and people joining in. And ideas for the book began happening for me. And some of them seemed as though they didn't all belong in the same book. There's a serial killer in it, an unassuming guy in the real estate business in Kansas who suddenly discovers that he gets an awful lot of satisfaction out of killing women, and which he goes on to do intermittently. Meanwhile, a guy in Roseburg, Oregon, a bartender there, quits his job or walks away from his job and starts walking east across the country, and just starts out by walking over the Cascades, and people tend to join in. and the group begins to generate a sort of group energy, and remarkable things begin to occur. And I can't really effectively say very much more about it, but it was an extraordinary experience from an absolute standing start. 2 weeks after I got the idea for it, I was holed up in Virginia, and I was writing 20 pages a day of this. And after 23, 24 days, something like that, I had a book, and that was that.
I mean, your production has always amazed me, but something I've really kind of wanted to ask you is, are you a writer that do you need that solitude? Do you need the windows closed and noises off throughout the house, or do you need to be it? Because we have here at Western Connecticut State, we have an MFA program, and some of the writers go out to the Highlights Foundation in the Pocono Mountains, and they do some writing in solitude out there during the summer. Are you? Could you give us some insight into how you work when you're doing something like that?
Well, I've frequently over the years had a penchant for going away to work and holding up somewhere. I've worked frequently at writers' colonies, primarily the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts and Ragdale in Illinois. But I've also just gone and taken in Airbnb place somewhere or a hotel room before that, and just holed up and worked. And it seemed to work for me. Nowadays, I'm not inclined for that kind of station. And what work I've done in recent years, I've just done at home, working primarily mornings when I can. Age takes its toll, and one thing I've noticed is that I can't work as long or as rapidly as I used to, which is fine because I'm also not much inclined to. So
You've done so much work. I'm so grateful for this conversation today. I wanted to, do you have a lot of novels that just never made it out? I mean, either by your own standards or by the publishing industry's kind of fickle nature. Is there stuff that's still unpublished from you?
oh no. If there were and I liked it, I would self-publish it. But no, there's nothing like that. There have been a lot of books that didn't get finished over the years because for one reason or another.
Yeah.
That have been abandoned. But there's nothing lying in the trunk that wishes it could be published.
As bad as Craig Ferguson wishes, huh?
There you go.
There's not a Scudder out there. I wanted to ask you about one more book, and it has to do with our locality here in Danbury. I know we emailed about it just quickly, but can you just clarify that thing about Sinnerman and Danbury? Because I wanted to get like some statue made up here, and I just didn't know where we would put it. But I guess it was more of a kind of just picked a random place on the map, huh?
I really did. Danbury, rather Sinnerman is. It's arguably my first crime novel as such, though it was a while getting published. But Sinnerman is about a guy who inadvertently, essentially, kills his wife. He gives her a smack, and she winds up dead. Is what happens. And rather than call the police or the hospital or anything else, he leaves town and reinvents himself as a hoodlum 500 miles away or whatever. And the book takes place really in Buffalo, which is a city I knew reasonably well then, having grown up there. And I think I was probably living there when I wrote Sinnerman, but I'm not positive. I don't remember that all that clearly. But he had to start somewhere, and so I picked Danbury, which was a city that I'd never been to and knew virtually nothing about. And that's all. I think I've still never been to Danbury, but and it's unlikely I'll make a
Well, if
trip.
you live in New York, listen, there's still one guy up here that's hoping against hope. We'll get you up here to do some reading or something one day. But, you know, 1976, you published The Sins of the Father, and I remember reading that for the first time. And there are just parts of it that are chilling, and certainly the ending is just unbelievable and will stick with me pretty much for the rest of my life. I wanted to know where you were at that point in your life, because this is a huge I think publishing the Sins of the Fathers would be a huge turning point for any working writer, because this leads you to one of your most famous characters, you know.
Well, The Sins of the Fathers, which indeed came out in 1976, was the first book I wrote about Matthew Scudder. And in June, I'll be publishing the 20th, really, the autobiography of Matthew Scudder. But to talk about the origin, it was a character that came to me. It was at the suggestion, obliquely at the suggestion of my agent at the time, who said he thought I should develop a paperback series about a tough cop. And I thought about it some and decided that an ex-cop would be more the sort of thing I would want to write, because I didn't really want it to be a police procedural. I like those very much, especially when my old friend Evan Hunter did them as Ed McBain, but that was not my kind of thing. And I felt more comfortable with the character who was not part of an organization. And I wrote the first 3 books in the Scudder series, one right after the other. And Dell did not do well with them. That was during a period, they were contracted for by an editor named Bill Gross at Dell Publishing. And Dell was going through strange changes at the time, and the books didn't get distributed effectively. And while people who read them liked them well enough, they didn't sell much. And I figured the series was done and I'd never write about Scudder again. I wouldn't be able to.
Wow.
But that's not what happened. As we can see, long story short, I've returned to the series many times over the years. And most recently, coming out in June, on June 24th, on my birthday, was the autobiography of Matthew Scudder, which is a departure for me, a departure for Scudder, and I think a departure generally, because as far as I know, no one has ever really done this before. Here's a character who has been the first person narrator of, as I said, 19 books to date, which includes 18 novels and some short fiction. And this is a book, the premise of which is that I, Lawrence Block, have been asked to write a book about Matthew Scudder, that it's not my inclination to do this, that I don't like to talk about my characters as such from a distance, and that I decided that the best way to handle this chore would be to turn it over to Scudder himself and invite him to write his autobiography. So we have here the purported autobiography of a long-standing established fictional character. Now, as far as I know, only one person attempted this. I found out after I'd written my book, I found out that Georges Simenon had written a memoir of Maigret's, the French policeman who was his most prominent character. And so I read that to see what he'd done. And I don't like to throw shade at an author I greatly admire, like Simenon, but this book didn't amount to much. It wasn't really very good. He dashed it off, I think, with one hand and one eye closed. But I found Scudder's autobiography fascinating to write, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes over with readers. I think I doubt it'll be of enormous interest to people who aren't already fans of the series. But for them, the ones that I've tested it on have reacted very, very positively. It's not about cases. It's not about any crime being solved. It's about Scudder's life, what goes on between the books and before the books get started.
There's a lot about chance encounters with people and how it shaped his life and different relationships that he forged. A lot of people were introduced to Matthew Scudder the first time through the Liam Neeson film A Walk Among the Tombstones. Would you call this autobiography of Matthew Scudder a prequel?
No, I wouldn't. I'd call it the autobiography of this particular fictional character.
How long did it take you to write this?
Oh, gee, I don't know, a couple of months, I think. Not a tremendously long time, but a few months.
Was there any real spur? Did you say to yourself, was there any one thing that may be happening in the world or whatever that said, hey, maybe I could release this type of book about Scudder and it would lead to a whole new story? Was there anything that kind of pushed you into this direction?
It's exactly really as described by in the introductory remarks in the book. Someone wanted me to write a short piece really about Matthew Scudder, and this was my response to the request.
How do you feel like?
Until then, I had not a thought in the world about doing anything like this.
Still no wanting to do another Scudder mystery, huh?
Oh, at this point, I think I'm probably done writing. Now, I've said that before.
Yeah, and
on more than one occasion.
You always say that you're promoting a new book. You always say that.
That has indeed happened over the past 5 years or so. It seemed to me that it would be unlikely that I would write another novel, and I would do so. But it seems highly unlikely now, and I'm certainly not. I'm not taking vows renouncing the profession. I would be happy to be wrong about this, as I have been in the past. But we'll see. I'm also comfortable with the idea that the autobiography of Matthew Scudder may be the last book that I write. That's fine with me. I think it's a decent one to go out on. So however it works is fine.
I'm really enjoying it. And recently I saw Liam Neeson in the Marlowe movie, which is really nothing like anything Raymond Chandler wrote, and it's obviously written by another writer who was continuing the Marlowe thing. I wanted to ask you is there any interest in continuing Scudder in a different medium that you've discussed or you've been open to in the last few years? Any interest in a limited series or some type of new Scudder movie or anything like that from the outside world?
Oh, periodically there's some interest in that, and generally nothing comes of it. The whole world of visual media is a very different one. I mean, A Walk Among the Tombstones, which you mentioned, was a film released in 2014, written and directed by Scott Frank and starring Liam Neeson, who I thought did a very, very commendable job of being Scudder in the film. But that's a book that I wrote in, I think around 1992 or 3 or something, early 90s. It's a book that Scott Frank optioned and started trying to make a film from in 1998.
Wow.
And it took 16 years before something wound up on the screen.
1992, you wrote the book, or it was published.
Yeah, that sounds right. And so it all of this takes an astonishing amount of time. And things that look as though they were obvious, can't miss successes, you'd find out in retrospect that they took forever. ER, which only ran on TV for 1,000,000 years and did superbly in everything, and how could it miss? And it was 20 years from proposal to getting on the air.
Yeah.
Things take a lot of time, and most things don't materialize.
Well,
if I sit down and I write a book, I can do so with the reasonably certain knowledge that if I finish it, it's going to be published.
Did you?
With a film, you have nothing like that.
Well, yeah, you know what it is. I'm one of those people that I feel like I may be like Craig Ferguson a bit. I love Scudder and I really care about him, and I think that, what would be great is, I mean, if somebody were to create a limited series or some more movies about Scudder, it would be great. People are actually totally nostalgic for the old New York. I hear about it all the time. I mean, it's practically a commodity these days, So the point I'm trying to say is I think that a character like Scudder is great, and I would really hope that someday soon somebody comes along, because that would reintroduce a lot of people to the books themselves, and people would get really curious about the books. Just tell us one more time about when it's going to come out. It drops on your birthday, and I think there's some pre-order information too, right?
Yes, there is. If you search for it at any of the online booksellers like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, you'll find that you can indeed pre-order it. You can. It'll be coming out on June 24th in paperback and ebook, and there will be a limited hardcover edition from Subterranean Press, probably sometime in the fall.
Wow.
The title, as I said, is the autobiography of Matthew Scudder, and anyone who wants to can go to my website, www.lawrenceblock.com, and read the first about 3,000 words of it, which is about 10% of the book. I've published it there on a page that's called The Autobiography of Matthew Scudder, a Preview. And it's a page on my website. And if you have the skills of a 7-year-old, you can go there and find it. And that really is the best way I've been able to think of to let people know whether or not this is something they want to read. Here's 10% of the book or 5% of the book, whatever the hell it is. Read it and see what you think.
Right before we go, we do have so many students that do listen to the program that are in the MFA program. I always recommend A Writer Prepares to them. Is there any nugget that you want to pass on? Some little thing that is true about writing that you might want to use as some encouragement to some of the students here?
Sure. Write to please yourself, period.
Wow.
That's all. Um, that way, there's a chance that you'll please yourself, and you may even please somebody else. But that's really the simplest way. Also, that I would say to anybody starting out in the business is don't expect too much.
Lawrence Block with us on Public Reading Club on WXCI 91.7 in Danbury, Connecticut. Mr. Block, it's really been a pleasure to have you here. I probably could have asked you 100 more questions that would have just annoyed you, but
Thank God you didn't.
It was just really great to have you here today. I mean, if you ever would like to come up here and do some reading for the students, we could certainly make that happen for you, and just to get you here, because it's an honor to talk to you. You've inspired so many writers and me myself, and I really hope we get one more Scudder book, but if not, I know I'm going to spend a long time valuing what is there.
Well, thank you very much, man. You made this a pleasure.
Back here on WXCI 91.7 Danbury Radio, that was just great to chat with Lawrence Block. He's been an inspiration to me for many, many years. And like I said on the broadcast, I could have totally asked the guy 100 questions and spoken to him just at greater length. You know, there's so many books I wanted to ask him about. He is excited about the autobiography of Matthew Scudder, as I am, and I am looking forward to getting a paperback or a limited edition hardcover of that. It's really something to, I think it just speaks to the power of radio and the power of podcasting these days, where, we just started this show, myself, help from Pat Fournette, basic help in terms of getting a great logo made from Dom Alessandro. And, within just a few episodes, we're talking about the 5th episode here, we have a legend like Lawrence Block coming on. And that's really special, and that's something that is going to stay with me for a long time. He wrote many great books about the New York that I love, and it really kind of seems like the New York that I grew up in at times, because Scudder ages in real time, and it reminded me a lot of kind of the corners and the alleyways and the afternoon alcoholics bars of the Queens, New York that I grew up in. So great to have Lawrence Block on the show, prolific writer. If you haven't read any of the Scudder books, obviously 8 Million Ways to Die is a very popular one, and A Walk Among the Tombstones was kind of given a second life, and was ultimately reprinted by Hard Case Crime in a special edition. But A Walk Among the Tombstones is also good, but you should really start with The Sins of the Fathers. It's a gripping book. It's from a different time, but the story is just as it's just as taking. And I really think that once you get into the Scudder books, you want to keep going. I know just a few years ago during the pandemic times, I probably went through 6 or 7 in a clip before I got kind of back to work and stuff like that. So it was really great to have Lawrence Block on. We're going to have more crime fiction writers come on the show. It's a favorite genre of mine. I hope to have a few narrators and other journalists come on the show. Would be great, but I think it's a genre you can pretty much be sure if we can get them on the show one way or another, we're going to do that. April 12th, we're going to have a interview with Reed Farrell Coleman that will run, the following weekend. So middle of April, we'll be back with a new episode after this one, with Reed Farrell Coleman, who has a new book coming out called Sleepless City, and it's the start of a new series. So I'm excited to have him, coming on the show. But yes, we're going to continue with the tradition that we've started, and I want to make this abundantly clear to anybody that may be listening, even though I know we have a very small audience. If you want to recommend a book, if you're listening to this show, just DM us on Instagram at Public Reading Club, thepublicreadingclub@gmail.com. This is another place where you can be in touch with us. I don't get any emails on there. It's just the way things are, but I can tell you that I do check it, and I'd be happy to, read a book recommendation that comes from anywhere. And I'd also like to encourage people to send me more recommendations, especially for local authors in the Connecticut area, somebody promoting a new book, new project they've worked on. People come up from New York all the time to be on the show. We've had, as a matter of fact, I think of the 4 episodes we have had in studio, at least, 3 traveled from out of state, New York and New Jersey, and we had one episode was totally local with Brianna McGuckin and Anthony Dieris. But I love when people come in the studio. Hopefully next semester in the fall, I'm going to have an event, perhaps at Charter Oak Brewing in Danbury, where some of the writers we've had on this show can come and promote their latest project, can come sell books if that's what they're doing at this moment. I'm open to that. I'm also very much interested in submissions from writers of short stories that maybe take 10 to 15 minutes to read, that they'd either like to read live in the studio or they want to submit a recording of themselves reading that particular story. Like I said, I'm open to different genres. We'd love to read, have something read that was recently published by perhaps a WestCon MFA student, any other local writer, but anybody. I encourage anybody who comes on the show to read when they can, and that is something we'd like to do more of also. And like I said, we're going to continue with the great tradition that we've already started of users submitted book recommendations. And I have to tell you, this guy Eugene Kehoe, gentleman, is he's definitely passionate about reading, and he's been sending us voicemail. So we're going to continue to play those. But don't be shy. If your friend wrote a book and you want to tell us about it in a recommendation form, either via email or you want to send us a voicemail at 917-692-9605, you can do that. Anything you want. You can voice record yourself on your phone and just send us the file at thepublicreadingclub@gmail.com. Might be the easiest way. So just keep in mind, any genre, anything like that, I'd be excited to have you on. So I hope you enjoyed the interview today with Lawrence Block. I know I did. And I can tell you that what we want to do is get more participation. So please send us some book recommendations. Right now, here's the latest book recommendation from Mr. Eugene Kehoe.
Hello, this is Eugene Kehoe. Drinking a lot, and I like books and stuff. And Matt, what's with your voice, man? You seem a little monotone and a little, taking it down a couple levels from your podcast and the hat tricks. And I'm just wondering about that. It's pretty sexy, actually. I couldn't mind, But I found a book sitting around one of the lounges, and it's actually pretty good. It's called Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. It's set in World War II in Italy under Mussolini. Kid turns into a driver, drives a Nazi general around. He never drove drunk. I can't say the same here, Matt Hat. Then he falls in love. I'm not going to ruin any more of the plot. Very good. The story of triumph, love, and tragedy. I give it 5.5 bottles out of a 6-pack because it made me cry, but that's because I realized I was out of beer and package stores were closed. Guys, WXCI, great. I got a call. I'm out. Thank you. Eugene Kehoe. See you.
So yeah, Thank you, Eugene Kehoe, for your contribution to the recommendations here on Public Reading Club from WXEI 91.7 on FM and streaming on WXEI.org. A funny thing happened to me the other day at our local frozen yogurt spot right here in Bethel, Connecticut, which is right next door to Danbury, where I live. Earlier in the week, I was recognized by the lady who owns Peach Wave. It's a great place. And she asked me if I was the host of the local hockey podcast that I do with my engineer and producer here, Patrick Fournette. I am, in fact, that person, and she just let me know how much she liked the show. I let her know how much I liked Peach Wave, which is a great frozen yogurt spot, and I'm a little addicted. And I go back in there today, and what I find is that she's got this huge stack of books behind the counter. And they're Lee Child books, and several different people. She comes also a book by James Patterson, which was really written by Mike Lupica. It's out right now. It's called The House of Wolves, Murder Runs in the Family. And this is a new book by the great sports writer Mike Lupica, which has been co-signed by James Patterson, as James Patterson is known to do. So I wanted to say two things. I was super blown away that Patricia actually reads 80 books a year. And I posted that on our Instagram at Public Reading Club. So that's another thing I wanted to do. I want to connect with the people who are out there in the wild reading. And I've done that, with people like Eugene who call in, and Ron Evans, who's a prolific reader who lives here in the Danbury area. Also, Alan Patrone, who sent us the very first book recommendation. But I'm going to treat what just happened at Peach Wave kind of like a book recommendation, because Patricia gave me a book that has the book is The House of Wolves, Murder Runs in the Family, by James Patterson and Mike Lupica. Okay, so the thing about it is there's a note written on a Habitat for Humanity pad taped to the front of the book. And Patricia tells me that the note written on the front of the book and this particular stack of books came from a friend of hers who was also a former teacher, who reads so much that sometimes she buys the same book twice. And in this case, she did with House of Wolves, and it was among that pile. But I'm just going to read what it says here from, the anonymous recommender who had this book prior to Patricia giving it to me today, because there were two of it in the stack, and she kind of passed it off to me. So the note reads, "This is an unusual book for Patterson. It's okay, but not his best. I guess sports enthusiasts will be more impressed." So there you have it. I've only heard good things about James Patterson and Mike Lupica's House of Wolves from one other reader. There's a little bit of buzz about it. There's kind of a kooky commercial of both Lupica and Patterson howling, promoting the book. And I know their wives are writing books together, or they're kind of beginning to collaborate somehow. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting pairing of two. It's like kind of as it says on the inside cover, James Patterson and Mike Lupica are the thriller dream team. Just to talk about Mike Lupica a bit, he's a great sports writer, and I had the honest to God truth, it was an honor to kind of work with him briefly while I worked at the Daily News over 10 years ago. But this is an interesting collaboration. Mike Lupica did write kind of thriller crime stuff many years ago. I'm not exactly sure when his first book came out. That was like a fictionalized book. He's a prolific sports writer that had a column in the New York Daily News for many years and was on ESPN with his own show. He had a lot of, I guess he had many years where he really just focused on sports writing, but he wrote many books. Adult series, the Peter Finley series, I guess that appeared in 1986. So he had 3 books, Dead Air, Extra Credits, Limited Partner. Those last 2 came out in 1990. So, he's had a prolific career as a writer. It was interesting to see him kind of go in this direction, working with Patterson. He himself, Lupica, has written many of kind of the legacy books that have come out from Robert B. Parker, including the Jesse Sohn series, which I think he's working on now. But he's also written Spencer, and he's written Sonny Randall. So it's interesting to see them collaborating. I'm sure that this is a book that's readily available at supermarkets and drugstores all over town, and I maybe I will crack into it, but I just wanted to bring a book to this show that was out there in the wild. I would have actually loved to have read all the notes on the ladies' books on the air here, and maybe if Patricia hears this in time, she'll save the notes. And I'll read the whole book cover notes on the air. But yeah, I think there's a lot of that I'd like to bring to the show too. So if you've discovered people out there in the wild, I'm really interested in hearing from readers as well as writers. We've been so lucky on this episode. We had Lawrence Block. This is a writer that I have spent just many years admiring. You could probably tell that I was super nervous interviewing him because there's just there are writers that encapsulate things that are really dear to you, and when you get the opportunity to interview somebody like that, it's a big task. You know what I mean? I probably would have had a better chance, like trying to write some, epic biography of him or academic paper than I would actually just talk to him face to face and try and broadcast it to all of you. But I did, and I hope people do check out the autobiography of Matthew Scudder and all the Matthew Scudder books. If you're into the old New York, I use the expression the dirt under the fingernails type of people that are, out there on both sides of crime, you'd really like the Matthew Scudder series. And that's from Lawrence Block. And the autobiography of Matthew Scudder is, I'm going to say it's a really special book, just very different from kind of the gritty street tales that really make up a lot of exciting material from Block. So it was great to have them on. I was really grateful for Patricia kind of letting me take a copy of The House of Wolves and walk away with the note here. But if any of you have book recommendations, please send them to us. We have really started to get to a point where the show is starting to pick up. We have some good guests planned. I've been dropping hints on the Instagram about who's coming on and about future shows. So stay tuned to Public Reading Club, and we'll be back with more. Thanks again for coming by.
Public Reading Club is a production of WXCI 91.7 Danbury Radio, hosted by Matt Caputo and produced by Pat Frenette and Matt Caputo.